The night she came back into my life, she was standing outside my door in the rain, soaked to the skin, trembling, and carrying nothing but a small overnight bag. I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she had changed, but because the woman I remembered had always been the strongest person I knew. Now she looked exhausted, frightened, and completely out of places to go. I opened the door wider and whispered, "Do you want to stay here tonight?" She looked at me for several seconds, her eyes filling with tears, before quietly replying, "If there's room in your bed." Those 8 words changed everything I thought I knew about love, loneliness, and second chances. Before we continue, if stories about kindness, forgiveness, unexpected love, and second chances touch your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need their own reminder that sometimes, life gives us another chance when we least expect it. Her name was Emma. 7 years earlier, she had been the person I believed I would spend my entire life with. We had met when we were both young, broke, and convinced that love could solve anything. We spent evenings walking through quiet streets, sharing cheap coffee, talking about the future as if nothing could ever separate us. I loved her deeply, but I was afraid of losing her. That fear eventually became the very thing that pushed her away. I wanted certainty. She wanted freedom to discover who she was. When she accepted a job in another city, I asked her to stay. She asked me to trust her. I couldn't. We argued, said things we didn't mean, and finally walked away from each other with wounded pride. For years, I heard almost nothing about her. I built a quiet life for myself. I bought a small house at the edge of town, worked long hours, and learned how to eat dinner alone without feeling sorry for myself. I told everyone I was happy. Eventually, I almost believed it. But every time rain tapped against the windows, I remembered Emma. She had always loved rainy nights. She used to say the sound made the world feel softer. Then, one rainy Thursday night, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it and saw her, my heart seemed to forget how to beat. She looked older, but not in the way people age. She looked tired from carrying too much for too long. Her eyes were red, her hair was wet, and her hands were shaking around the strap of her bag. I didn't ask what had happened immediately. I simply stepped aside. She entered slowly, looking around the house as if it were a museum filled with memories. Nothing had changed much. The old wooden table was still near the window. The bookshelf still held the novels we had once argued about. Even the small blue mug she had given me years ago was sitting in the kitchen cabinet. She noticed it. "You kept that?" she whispered. I nodded. She looked away before I could see her cry. That night, she finally told me the truth. The life she had left me for had not become the life she imagined. The job had disappeared after a company collapse. The relationship she entered afterward had ended badly. She had spent years pretending everything was fine because she was ashamed to admit she had made mistakes. Recently, she had lost her apartment and discovered that the people she thought would help her had vanished when she needed them most. She had nowhere to go. I wanted to ask why she had come to me after all these years. Instead, I made tea. Sometimes love doesn't begin with grand words. Sometimes it begins with someone quietly placing a warm cup in front of another person and saying, without saying it, "You don't have to explain everything tonight." We sat at the kitchen table until nearly midnight. She told me about the years I had missed. I told her about mine. There were painful truths between us, but there was something else too, understanding. Eventually, I looked at the clock and realized the storm outside had become worse. I told her she could take the spare room. She stared at the floor. Then she asked, "Do you still sleep alone?" I didn't know how to answer. After a long silence, I asked the question that had been frightening me since she walked through the door. "Do you want to stay here tonight?" She looked directly into my eyes. "If there's room in your bed." My heart raced, but I knew those words weren't really about the bed. She wasn't asking for romance. She was asking whether there was still a place for her in the life of the man she had once loved. I took a breath and told her there was room, but only if she understood that nothing had to happen. She could sleep safely, and in the morning we would figure out everything else. She nodded. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, leaving space between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I heard her quietly crying. I turned toward her but didn't touch her. She whispered that she had spent years believing that returning meant admitting she had failed. I told her that returning didn't mean failure. Sometimes it meant finally having the courage to admit where your heart belonged. She reached across the space between us and held my hand. That was all. No dramatic kiss. No promises. Just two people holding hands in the darkness, realizing that 7 years of distance had not erased everything. The next morning, Emma was gone. For a moment, I thought history had repeated itself. Then I found a note beside the blue mug. She had written that she needed to find a job, rebuild her confidence, and learn to stand on her own again. She didn't want to stay because she was desperate. She wanted to stay someday because she had chosen me. Months passed. We remained in contact. I helped where I could, but I never tried to rescue her. Emma found work at a small design company and slowly rebuilt her life. She became stronger. Happier. More like the woman I remembered, but wiser than before. 1 year later, on another rainy evening, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, Emma stood there smiling. This time she wasn't carrying an overnight bag. She held a small suitcase and a key. She looked at me and said, "I don't need a place to sleep anymore." I smiled. She held up the key. "I came because I want to build a home with you." For the first time in years, I understood that love isn't about holding someone tightly enough to prevent them from leaving. It's about giving them enough freedom to return by choice. I stepped aside. She walked into the house. And that night, when the rain began falling against the windows, we sat together on the old couch, laughing about how strange life could be. The woman who once left because she needed to find herself had finally returned, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found somewhere she wanted to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely new life. And before you leave, comment, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Because sometimes, the person standing outside your door isn't asking you to save them. They're simply asking if there is still a little room in your heart. And sometimes, the greatest love story doesn't begin when two people meet. It begins when they finally learn how to find their way back to each other.